Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. Tell me otherwise. Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for having me. There's obviously nothing I love more than talking about women's sport, so this is an absolute joy. Yes, we are the Women's Sports Trust. We are a charity. We were founded back in 2012 off the back of the London Olympics, and our co-founders feeling the frustration that women's sport had been in the spotlight for those glorious 3 weeks, and then and for the Paralympics as well. And then unfortunately, sort of as usual, kind of seemed to go away again in the media. So from their perspective, they wanted to understand, how do we make sure that that visibility of women's sport is kind of continued? And also, how do we make sure that women's sport is viable, so sustainable? Because visibility is one thing, so making sure that we're seen is one thing, but then also getting the funds and the money back in the back end to make sure it's sustainable is the other. So our kind of aims are around identifying, promoting a real diverse range of role models. We want to hear from all women in sport. That's what we're really passionate about, and we're very deliberate about that. We want to increase the percentage and quality of media coverage, which I think we all feel passionate about, that we want to be able to not look at the back pages of newspapers and just see all men's sport. It should feel odd in this day and age that would even happen. And we want to sort of shift the landscape for women's sport in general, to make sure that we've got more brands coming in, sponsorship, that, as I said, it becomes sustainable overall. So it's been a really busy year. We are all part-time within the charity. We're sort of small but mighty. And we've had a really, really busy year, which has been phenomenal considering lockdown. So I'm going to talk about a couple of these projects. Unlocked, which is about how we power female elite athletes to change the future of women's sport. The Ambition project that we launched last year off the back of COVID. The Closing the Visibility Gap, where we looked at kind of the impact of visibility on women's sport. And then we've also been doing, I'm not going to refer to this today, but we've been working with an agency to look at viewing figures specifically for women's sport, because what we found is there's always been a lack of data when it comes to knowing who's actually who's watching and getting involved in women's sport. If we don't have that, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to sell it. So that's another thing we're looking at this year, but I'm not going to necessarily go through that today. I'm going to start with the best project I think I've ever had the chance to work on, which is called Unlocked. So a few years ago, we did a study with about 174 elite female athletes. And they told us that, even though women's sport was increasing in sort of, people kind of knew that women's sport was, the platform for women's sport was getting bigger, they didn't really know how to use or grow their own influence within that, and how they could use their own platforms to do things that they really felt passionate about. And also they didn't really understand how to unlock the value that was coming. So they knew kind of potentially they could earn more money, but they didn't really know how to do that. And anyone who's worked with elite sportswomen will know a lot of the time they will give their time away for free, which is lovely of them, but it's not going to be sustainable. So there was a lot around how do we help these women understand their worth and be able to really get paid for the work that they're putting out there as excellent role models. So what we did is we developed Unlocked, which was last year we had 41 athletes. This year we've got 35. It's completely about diversity, making sure we've got representation from every area of sport. And that is the beauty of it, because we get really interesting perspectives. So we put these elite sportswomen together in a community that we then pair them with what we call activators. So that's people from media, sport, politics, whatever area they show an interest in. So if they want to drive participation, then we'll put them, with someone in the sports industry. If they really want to drive representation within the media, we'll put them with, the BBC Sport Women's editor, whatever it might be. So there's a kind of dual thing that goes on. We've got our community where we speak to the athletes on a kind of bi-weekly basis, where we all get together and talk about the issues around women's sport, inspire each other, talk about how we can make a change and kind of create action out of that. But also they have a kind of individual one-on-one activator who can really help them hone in on what they want to deliver, because a lot of our sportswomen are very ambitious and very excitable, and they want to change the world. And a lot of the time, what we need to do is help them just focus a little bit and really focus on kind of one or two things that they really want to make a difference in. So it's quite unique, and I think the thing that we're most proud of here is that there's a lot of talk about diversity in sport, but not necessarily a lot of action. And this is very much an action-orientated program where we can go to these elite women, understand what they want to change, and really help them deliver that. And just to give you kind of one top line stat, which I adore, is that 5 of our intake from last year out of the 41 have already joined sports boards off the back of the program. And to me, that's exactly what this is all about, literally changing the face of women's sport by putting these women in leadership positions, being able to put across their point of view and really make the change. And, you know, one of the things that I've been in charge of is just been trying to get some more diverse stories out there in the media. And a lot of what we hear in women's sport is, oh, you know, the media aren't really interested in women's sport. Well, I didn't really find that, to be honest. I found that our athletes had unbelievable stories. And actually, the journalists, when I spoke to them about it, were more than willing to share those stories. It's just often they didn't know how to get to them. So there's a lot that we need to do about creating this conduit between the amazing role models that we've got in sport, the amazing stories that we've got in women's sport, and the media, and putting those two things together. And there's something a little bit broken about that at the moment, which is we're trying to work through various things that I'll talk about in a moment. So yes, we did loads of things. We did a brilliant double page spread in the Sun newspaper on International Women's Day with some of our athletes shown, which you can see in the middle there, which was on the Andrew Marr show. We got a lot of our girls out there speaking at speaking events. We actually got the Telegraph to come in and listen to one of our Zoom calls with all of our athletes, so they could really, Molly from the Telegraph could really hear what the athletes were talking about and really understand their point of view. And this, you know, shouldn't be revolutionary, but slightly feels like it sometimes because, as I said, often these stories aren't being found and aren't being told, and we kind of all need to take a collective responsibility for making sure that happens. In terms of unlocking success, I just wanted to kind of go through some of the kind of key things that we learnt about Unlocked as we went through it. One of them is this kind of rise of athlete activism. A lot of the athletes just needed a little bit of time to step back and understand what they wanted to influence. And when they did that, they kind of got to their passion point and really honed down, like, this is what I want to change. And on the right, this is a picture of Alice Deering, who is a phenomenal woman, 24. She's just been to Tokyo to her first Olympics. And she really wanted to focus on creating better diversity in swimming. And she has co-founded the Black Swimming Association and is doing an unbelievable job. And I think that's a great example of an athlete who, you know, at the same time as her professional career is kind of, you know, rising and she's getting all these amazing opportunities, she's able to balance it with actually doing something for her sport over and above, you know, just performing, which frankly is amazing for her to do that. But so she is an amazing spokesperson, role model, and, you know, I think having her last year has been brilliant because we've been able to, Alice has come back and spoken to the athletes this year, and she is inspiring the sort of the next cohort into increasing diversity in their own sports as well. So I think in terms of athlete activism, we just, as a group, as a community, as an industry, we just need to support that. You know, if we see young women, not just elite women, but if we see young women who really want to make a stand, who really want to make a difference, we should be encouraging that, to listen to them, to understand, you know, what they need from us, how we can support them, what we can do to make that change, because it's growing and it's important. And it will make a huge difference, not only in sport, but in society as a whole, if we get this right. The next thing was around visibility barriers. As I mentioned, a lot of the journalists were coming back to us and saying that, you know, really want to tell more interesting, diverse stories, but we haven't got access to them. So this kind of got us thinking about all sorts of things. I think in men's sports, traditionally, PR people like myself have been sort of taught to get sportsmen to sort of hold back. You know, it's all about protection, like don't speak openly, you know, only say so much. Whereas I think that has then been put onto female sportswomen. And actually, you know, we need them to be able to speak freely, because if they can speak freely and openly, they're going to provide more interesting content, and that's going to get bigger pieces, and the visibility overall is going to grow. So there was an interesting point that a lot of the athletes said they felt scared sometimes to speak out on issues in case it was going to affect their sponsorships, in case it was going to affect their place in their team, or playing for their country. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of want to tackle now, is making sure that all women feel that they can speak out and sort of say their truth. And you know, if they're being silenced in any way, that's not a positive. So again, elite women, brilliant, but also any women that they're able to kind of speak openly and talk about their own experiences. The other part of visibility is that, you know, a lot of our athletes now are growing up as digital natives, and they are, you know, they found it frustrating that they couldn't find content that they were interested in. So Kate Cross from cricket is a brilliant example of this. She was like, you know, I was growing up as a girl playing cricket in my teens. I could never find anything that really spoke to me. So she created her own podcast, which is called No Balls, which has been brilliant. This is Rona here, who's a rugby union player on the left, and she launched her own women's sport platform. We have many other examples of this. And I think that's an interesting opportunity to look at women or girls who might be interested in doing this, you know, starting their own YouTube channel, you know, becoming an influencer in women's sport, and actually, you know, create engaging content that other girls and women are going to be interested in. How can we support that better? And how can we make sure we help them grow those audiences? Because when I spoke to the athletes about their audiences, they, you know, and started to help them understand who their audience was, they were, you know, predominantly speaking to teens and women kind of 18 to 25, which is obviously an amazing audience to be able to reach. A lot of brands really want to reach that audience. So I think helping them understand, you know, who their audience is and how they can grow that is going to be really important, and that we, you know, grow this visibility. The other thing about elite women is that they're an amazing talent pool for leadership in sport. Again, one of those things that we often hear in women's sport is there's not enough female leaders. And yet, what one of the England footballers was saying to me is that, you know, she'd played for England for a long time. She retired to have, she had a child last year, and then she's retired. And then she just said, you know, it's kind of frustrating because the only thing anyone ever talks to me is about coaching. Like, that's the next natural step for me, is coaching. And she said, I don't want to be a coach. I want to run women's football. And I thought that was one of those kind of times when I was like, yeah, why? And why shouldn't you be running? You know, you've been involved in football for 20 years. You're a perfect person to be able to run that. So she's now we've supported her. She's now doing an MA in sports leadership. And I think, you know, again, looking in these sports and looking at the women, maybe as they're towards not even towards the end of their career, maybe in the midst of their career, starting to talk to them about, you know, what would you like to do next? Could we help you shadow people within the industry? Could we help you find a role within the sports industry that you might want to move on to? Because we don't want to lose them. They come with so much amazing experience and knowledge. So that is it's really key for us, and why we are really pushing for them to take on leadership roles. And again, a lot of the athletes are saying, oh, I couldn't really imagine, you know, taking on this kind of leadership role when I'm still competing. But I think we've been able to kind of get rid of that barrier and say you can do both. And they have been. So an amazing talent pool. And the other thing around sportswomen is that they are hugely compelling. And actually, if you put them in front of anyone, I think you would struggle to come away not being A, impressed, or B, you know, thinking differently, or C, doing whatever they're asking you to do, because they are articulate, passionate, hugely intelligent. And so where possible, we think, you know, trying to get to elite women and engage them in situations, whether it's putting them in front of brands, you know, whether it's about using them to talk to the local MPs, to lobby. We've been really helping the women in our programs set up a LinkedIn profile, for example, reaching out to politicians, reaching out to local influencers, reaching out to national influencers, whoever it might be, to say, look, you know, they don't necessarily feel that people would want to listen to them. And we've been really, saying that that's not true. These people will really want to listen. So that's really key. And then finally, I think this has been mentioned before, but community is so important. I think in our community of elite sportswomen, we have laughed, we've cried, we've had, particularly last year, I think in COVID, we shared a lot of personal stuff amongst us. And frankly, hearing some of these women, even though they've been at the top of their sport and some of the things that they've been through was kind of astounding. But I think creating a safe space for women to be able to really talk about whatever's on their mind and to talk it through. I think women always need to kind of talk it through. You don't naturally just have an opinion on something. Sometimes you really need to kind of talk it through with people to really understand lots of different perspectives and get to your opinion. So that's been really helpful. And I think for WST's role in that is you don't just create a community by just putting people together. You create a community by helping structure that community. So making sure that people have got time, pause for thought, that certain people get time to make sure that everyone contributes. There's lots of effort that needs to go into creating a good community, but when you get it right, it's so powerful. So I think, wherever possible, this is for elite women, but for any women, creating community around certain issues is really important. And one of the lovely quotes that one of the hockey players said to me afterwards, she was like, I just love our Zoom calls because I come away and it's refueled my positive petrol tank. And I feel I can go and fight another day, because it's hard sometimes pushing for change all the time. It's tough, we all know that. But actually, if you've got a community around you who can really encourage you to keep going, that's really key. So I know I haven't got much time left. So just in the next bit, I'm going to literally just do for 1 minute. The rest of this presentation is just highlighting a few things that people might find useful. Last year, we did an ambition report, which was talking to 54 leaders across the industry, so broadcasters, digital platforms, rights holders, brands, and we talked to them about what's your vision for women's sport. And off the back of that, we created toolkits and themes around what you can do within your own organisation to really help women's sport move forward. That is all on our website, so it's really worth having a read through because there's some really compelling stuff in there. We also did a project earlier this year about closing the visibility gap, which is all about understanding how much coverage women's sport is actually getting at the moment. We have seen an increase of 1,350% since 2012, but we were going from a very small base. 2019 was obviously when the Women's World Cup was, which gave us a bit of a spike, but we are continually monitoring and playing back to the media how much they are showing women's sport. So on a 6 monthly basis, we are looking at the moment, these 4 websites and understanding what's the prominence of women's sport on those websites. We then have gone back and actually played this data back to these organisations to try and understand how they could be better. It has to be said, BBC Sport actually in 2019 nearly at one point created parity and had 50-50 women's sport, men's sport on their website for a golden moment, but it's obviously not consistent. Sky Sports are trying, they're doing a lot more. So, we work with these organisations behind the scenes. We try and do as much data gathering as possible to try and, help them understand, where they can make positive change in terms of visibility. And the reason that's important that is if we can crack visibility, we believe it will generate £1 billion worth of value by 2030. It really is the key into unlocking a lot of potential growth, and particularly in terms of funds. So there's some other bits and bobs on there. So my key takeaways, very, very fast, is, embrace female athletes at whatever age or level, listen to them and engage with them. They will have lots to say. And, if there's, female elite athletes in your region, please get in touch with them because they will be amazing. Create community where possible. Generate visibility for female athletes if you have authority over that. We've got loads of how-to guides to make women's sport more visible and, able to hold yourself to account. And then, if you can, use our data and insight to shape thinking and consider targets for improvement. As we said, this is all about action, not about words. So targets are really key.